How realistic is like the movie Top Gun? I know it's obviously fictional, but I mean, is it ultra competitive?
Everybody wants to win.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you got a bunch of type A personalities there, but it's not a competition like the movie makes it out to
Gotcha.
be. You're basically teaching them how to win, how to survive, but then how to train and teach others.
I gotcha.
Well, welcome to the table. Joining us today is Harry Schmidt, Director of Strategic Management at O'Shea.
Yep.
We sure are glad to have you join us today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yeah,
Thanks, Brad.
thank you.
Really humbling to be here. You've had a number of guests in the who's who of Springfield, and I certainly don't include myself on that list. So
Yeah, well, we do.
Yeah.
So.
Clearly, after reading your bio,
Yes.
we should have had you on first.
Well, I was going to say, clearly it's the week between Christmas and New Year's, so you're looking for somebody to fill the gap there.
Not really.
No.
Really. No, it's interesting, as you mentioned that, one of the things we've learned is how much people love to hear people's stories, and especially the story behind the story.
Sure.
We know you're, business strategy guy at O'Shea, but it's the story behind the curtain that people love to hear.
Yeah.
And how long have you been at O'Shea? 4 or 5 years? It seems
4.5 years. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
Your timing is good. So spent some time with Memorial Health. It was a Memorial Health system back there back then. For about 13 years or so in various roles. Mm-hmm. And then I moved here to Springfield when I joined the Air National Guard back in 2001, 2002 timeframe.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So I'm not originally from Springfield.
I think we first crossed paths when you were with Memorial. Maybe when you were CEO at Passivant in Jacksonville at one point in time, and prior to that with Memorial,
I was
in facilities.
Vice President of Facilities Management. So design and construction, environmental services, security, food and nutrition, environmental safety, those kind of things. That's where I started building the relationship with O'Shea Builders at the time. Obviously meeting Mike and Tyler Cormany and the team there. So I've been familiar with them. We've been working together since 2009 in various capacities.
Two awesome organizations for sure.
I've been very, very, very blessed.
Did you come from the construction background before you got involved with Memorial?
No. I mean, the only construction background I have is my dad's he was a union electrician down in St. Louis growing up, and I did spend a summer working with him in I think my title was gopher.
Okay. Yeah.
So spent some time.
I had that title growing up too.
Yeah, exactly. And I always I asked my dad. I said, so either he had me work that summer because he wanted me to be an electrician and work in construction, or he didn't want me to do that. So give me the exposure and maybe make the choice. So it was a great summer and good exposure.
Sure. That's awesome. Well, one thing, we had lunch, Chris, I think I told you this, and that's why I said we have got to get this guy on our podcast, because I find your career from, the Naval Academy all the way through to where you are today, but the things that you did while you were a fighter pilot on the ship. Tell us a little bit about that, because it sounds like you had to figure things out with not a lot of background in certain, like the investigations and things like that you were involved in.
Yeah, sure. It's, in the Navy is a very unique organization, and a lot of people think that they train you and your education for everything, and they do give you a lot of training, but a lot of things it's on the job training. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting after the Naval Academy. I was fortunate I got selected for a pilot position, and at the time, when you go to pilot training, you don't know what you're going to go fly, right? So you start going through the process, and you got to go through the ground school, and then you start the primary flight training, and then there's certain cuts, of how you're going to get selected, or you get you have a choice, and then whether or not you get the choice, right? Needs of the Navy and some of these other things. So I was very fortunate. I was able to go into the jet training pipeline, and then coming out of that, I was selected to go fly F-18s, and you think that, hey, I'm going to show up and be a pilot. Mm-hmm. And went to my first squadron, and I think, Brad, what you're alluding to is what you don't know is that flying is a collateral duty. So everybody's got a job to run the squadron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got a public affairs officer, you've got a legal officer, you've got all the things that you need to run a business or an organization. Sure. You're doing the same thing contained in that squadron. So I showed up, and my first job was I was the public affairs and legal officer.
Is that right?
And you're like, okay, I just came from pilot training. Like, I don't know what this legal thing is,
now.
right?
Yeah.
And we had some situations that were really, really challenging. We had some sailors that were bad actors, and basically I ended up prosecuting them. You know, you take them,
right?
you take them through the.
So how'd you figure that out?
Yeah, you take them through the Uniform Code of Military Justice process, and there were 7 of them that ended up getting put in jail.
Is that right?
And here I am. I'm, maybe 22 or 23 years old, out of pilot training, and I'm reading somebody their Miranda rights.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
And you're like documenting it and making sure you're following the process. So it was, you talk about on the job training, we had a judge advocate general that you use as a consultant, but you're doing the initial you're doing the initial investigation, processing the paperwork, and you're like, hey, here's where I think we are in this process. So it was pretty interesting. That was my first, year and a half or so, or 2 years in my pilot position.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't sound like flying to me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. How realistic is the movie Top Gun? I know it's obviously fictional, but I mean, is it ultra competitive?
So the purpose of the schoolhouse, of Top Gun itself. So the title is the Navy Fighter Weapons School. So it's a schoolhouse.
Okay.
And the idea there is that you're going to obviously train them on the current tactics, but then you're also going to teach them how to be a teacher. The idea is that they're going to come to the schoolhouse and they're going to get an endorsement, meaning the patch, so they'll be a patch wearer. And the endorsement is not only, yes, you understand the current level of tactics, but then you've been blessed to go be a teacher back in the fleet.
Okay.
So as far as the competitive piece of it, everybody wants to win.
Sure.
Yeah. And you got a bunch of type A personalities there, but it's not a competition like the movie makes it out to
Gotcha.
be. You're basically teaching them how to win, how to survive, but then how to train and teach others.
I gotcha.
And you can imagine in those scenarios, the risks are tremendous.
I can't imagine.
And so, your number one priority is the safety of everybody that's in the evolution, right?
Sure.
And making sure that, hey, we've got some set rules that we're not going to violate these or break them. Because, unfortunately, all those rules are written in blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
So then, they're the keepers of the standards as you send them out and continue to train. So you want to train to the edge. They talk about the edge of the envelope, and that would be the flight envelope. So you're teaching people to fly airplanes where you're right on the edge of where they're not going to fly anymore, if that makes sense. So the situation, in the first movie, right, where the engine flames out and goes into a spin or whatever. I mean, you'll have situations where somebody loses control of an airplane.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah. And it happens. And you're like, okay, how do you recover it? How do you, what do you do in those scenarios, and how do you train people to handle those? Okay, what was the symptom of the airplane? What was it doing? It was talking to you somehow, right? And making sure you're like, okay, I recognize that.
Yep.
Because if you can figure out where your airplane can fly and somebody else's can't, there's your tactical advantage.
Sure.
So there's how you're always comparing and understanding. There's a lot of, going into the charts and the graphs and saying, okay, this is the performance chart of this airplane. Here's the performance chart of your airplane. Here's where you win, right? Here's where he wins. Now, it's provided if he or she can fly the airplane there. So it's one thing academically to say, yes, this is where I win. But now can I get into that scenario situation and then capitalize on it?
Yeah.
And that's all the the teaching and briefing and debriefing parts of that.
Did you ever have any hairy situations like flying or training where you're like, ooh, that was close?
I've had more than my share.
Is that right?
I bet so.
When you're getting in these situations, things are happening so fast, right?
Yeah.
If you're going supersonic, you're moving, you're going about a mile every 6 seconds.
Yeah. Wow. That was unbelievable.
You know, so, you know, you think about that. If somebody's at 10 miles, you know, you're less than 60 seconds away from each other.
Right.
Man.
And if he's going supersonic, then cut that in half.
Yeah. Right. Unbelievable.
So,
yeah.
you know, an airplane, a fighter-sized airplane at 10 miles is the tip of a pencil.
Man.
Wow.
So that's what you're looking for in the sky. And you're going to pass within 30 seconds of each other.
Unbelievable.
And that's provided you see everybody, right?
Right.
You don't always see everybody. You don't know where they're coming from necessarily.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a couple times where you're like,
Wow. Yeah.
That was close.
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
how do I learn from that?
Right.
Yeah.
But we have rules, too. You're trying to set up rules, and you're like, you know, you understand, like, for example, you've got certain blocks of airspace, and you say, okay, if you don't have full situational awareness, you don't come out of your block.
Gotcha.
So, you know, and it'll just depend on how you set that up. And you're like, yeah, I'm not sure. And you'll kind of drift towards, you know, for example, the fighters have 0 to 4 and the bad guys then have 5s to 9s. So if you go to 13,000 feet and if he doesn't see everybody, you know, he's supposed to be at, you know, 15, 16,000 feet. So,
Right.
you know, you have one of those set up.
Man.
But sometimes you're like, yeah, I see everybody. No, I didn't.
Oh man, unbelievable!
Yeah.
a whole nother world. Now, were you a Top Gun instructor? If that's that is the correct term.
I was fortunate enough. I went through the training as a student in like '93, and then I was invited back to be an instructor, and I was an instructor from from '95 to '99.
Gotcha.
Oh, wow.
And then I was really fortunate. So the Navy and the Air Force set up exchange programs, so that way we can learn from each other. So Top Gun always had at least one Air Force pilot on staff.
really?
Okay.
And then there was a position at the Air Force Fighter Weapons School as an exchange instructor. And so I was the first one to go fly for the Air Force. And then I got to go through their schoolhouse in the F-16. And then I stayed on to be an instructor there for about 3 years as well.
So that was completely different schoolhouse using the
Yeah.
okay.
So I've been through both fighter weapon schools, and then I was an instructor at both of them.
Wow.
Man, I had no idea that
yeah.
folks could serve in the Navy and then also in the Air Force. Yeah,
It was pretty funny because when I went through the cross training, I went to a transition course, and I think you get 6 rides in the F-16,
Okay.
and then I showed up to be a student,
Wow.
and it was like.
Yeah.
You know, you're trying to make, man, I haven't seen this. You know, there's an error or something of getting the airplane started, and you're like, I haven't seen this before, and trying to get it reset or what you're trying to do. And I'm like, can somebody help me get this thing rolling? You know, and you get out of the chocks, and people are like, who is this guy, and what are you
Does
doing?
he know
And
what he's doing?
Once you get it airborne, they're like going, hey, you could fly this thing. I'm like, well, it's a plane. It flies, right? Just like any other plane. But
I'm sure it's not quite that simple.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like when you get into somebody else's car.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and you're like, hey, let me drive, and you're like, what's that
What
like?
is that?
Yeah.
You know, you're like, you just hadn't had the exposure to everything.
Yep.
You know,
Are
so
the
it was,
cockpits fairly similar?
yeah,
between the
they're
two?
generally the
Yeah.
same. You know, you've
Gotcha.
got your multifunction displays, you've got the standard instruments. You know, you've got a gyro, you've got a compass. You know, you've got engine instruments, and
Yeah.
it's generally the same. And then, you know, one of the big differences was the, you know, in the F-18 at least, the stick is in between your legs, you know, and your throttle's over here, and then you've got a button for every finger, 4 for your thumb on this side, and then you've got, you know, pretty much one for everything on this. You know, you got 3 or 4 buttons for your thumb on here. Well, in the F-16, the stick is over here. It's a side controller, and so it's a little bit different. You're kind of sitting back, and I remember one of the first times I was. You know, you'll get in these times in the cockpit where you're a little bit busy,
Sure.
if you will, and you're like, you know, hey, I'm taking care of this. I'm going to do that. So you let go of the stick. It's, you know, you can trim the airplane up; it'll fly itself, or you know, or you can put it on autopilot. But so I let go of the stick. I was doing something real quick. I was busy, and I remember I went to grab the stick after I'd been flying the F-18 for 2,500 hours.
Yeah.
It was like. It's gone. I thought I was going to fall out of the airplane. All of a sudden, I reached for the stick, and I was like, "Oh my God, where'd it go?" And I'm like, okay, I'm back.
Regroup.
Let me think about this.
Man.
So your habits are,
Yeah, sure.
you know, trying to build those habit patterns.
Yeah.
Real super important.
So then, obviously, coming from the Navy and the Air Force, and your teaching and the fighter pilot, and then transitioning was your first like job outside of that with Memorial.
It was.
Okay.
It was.
Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And how did you end up at Memorial, coming out of your Naval and Air Force career?
I had we'd looked around at going to the airlines. You know, that's kind of the normal
Gotcha.
transit. I shouldn't say normal, but it's a common transition.
Yeah, makes sense.
And we had that was 2007. So we had a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. And my wife and I talked, and we said, well, we'll do it if we need to. But, you know, you don't realize that if you're flying for the airlines, you know, let's say, for example, if you're working 19 days a month, you're probably broken up into at least 3 trips. So there's a day of travel and front and back on each one of those. So there's 6 more days.
Oh, yeah.
You're gone 25 days a month.
Yeah.
And we're like, you know, I don't think we want to raise our kids that way. You know, I've gone a lot in the military.
Sure.
But, you know, especially, you know, getting into those super impressionable years, we wanted to be around. So we looked for different opportunities here. And I was really fortunate. Our neighbors right across the street were both physicians at Memorial, Eric and Lori Blyer.
Okay.
And Eric was like, hey, maybe I can help you out. And, you know, he connected me with basically, he was really close to Ed.
Oh, okay.
But then he handed me off to Woody.
Woody Hester.
Yeah, Woody Hester. So, you know, Woody was the chief people officer at the time. And then he, you know, kind of looked at my resume and he's like, well, I see you're a computer science guy. We need IT people.
Yeah.
And so that's where I started. I started an entry-level IT position.
Interesting.
Over at Memorial. And I was, you know, this is 2007. If you remember what the economy was like back then, I was super thankful to have a job.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know.
And then when you transitioned out of that department, who did you work for in facilities at Memorial? Would you ever?
Doug Ron.
Doug Ron, okay.
He was the chief operating officer at the time. And that's how I started into that role. I kind of moved. Funny story. I think I told you this too, right? So when I first started at Memorial in IT, you know, the people in IT would kind of look at me funny, and they're like, "What do you know about IT? You're a pilot."
Yeah, we got a fighter pilot running our IT.
And I was like, "Well, you know, just trying to learn and trying to contribute, you know." And then when I moved over into facilities, they were like, well, "What do you know about facilities? You're an IT guy." And I'm like, "Well, it's funny because the IT people think I'm up there. They just tell me I'm just a pilot."
Yeah, just give me the manuals. I'll figure it out. Right?
Yeah. You know, and
Point me in the right direction. Give me the info, and we'll make it happen.
I think that's leadership in a nutshell, though.
Right.
Part of it is
knowing
the right questions to ask.
Yes.
Right.
You know, and talking to people and saying, hey, what are your problems? You know, how can I help you? And, you know, how can we make this better?
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to transition to a, you know, big serious topic like leadership.
No. Well, that's, Well, we do want to talk about that.
Well, obviously you do that well, given your path from the Navy and the Air Force to Memorial and then end up in the CEO role over at Passivant and then your current strategy role.
And how did you and Mike get connected? And even you know, your job description or your role, how did that all come together?
Sure. I decided to make a transition out of Passivant, and you know, Mike had heard about it, and he called me and just said, "Hey, Harry, I don't know what your plans are. I was wondering if you'd be interested in talking about, you know, some opportunities with O'Shea."
Sure.
And so I was, you know, very humbled that he would reach out to me, and he just started talking. He said, "You know, your approach, you know, from a business mindset and your experience and background." You know, I don't know what a job description would look like, but, you know, if you'd start with us and, you know, basically give you the keys and look under the engine, look under the hood and tell me what you see. And so, you know, we just started in that kind of a mindset of, you know, start without a job description and see where it goes from there.
Interesting.
So it's developed over the last 4 years. I had a lot to learn about. I understood construction in the process, but the business of construction is quite a bit different.
Sure.
I think one of the things that was helpful is our margins compared to healthcare are very similar.
Okay.
You know, that they're not, you know, they're not super
Pretty
rich.
thin,
yeah,
right?
they're thin. So, you know, you've got that mindset already of saying, hey, you know, trying to be conservative in nature and understanding, you know, what are the different levers you have to pull to kind of make things happen from the business mindset. And I think that was helpful too. But, you know, both, like I said, both healthcare and construction are very similar. We're, you know, low single-digit margins.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, high volume, and cash flow's probably got to be a big issue,
Right.
with some of those large projects that you guys you could do.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the outlay, as far as whether it's a subcontractor or if you've got materials that you're purchasing, right?
Yeah.
By the time you pay for the materials, they get delivered, and then you can bill for them. And if you've got 60 days on the back end of that, you could be out of pocket for 90, 120 days.
Sure.
So no
Yeah,
cash.
and then knowing some of the massive projects you guys have done throughout Central Illinois, healthcare, schools. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw you're just breaking ground at, is it Hillsborough?
Yes, Hillsborough High School.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was another great opportunity. This happened before my time there. I say, we at O'Shea Builders started to nibble at the kind of K through 12 space. This was back in probably 2015-ish, and had a couple. There's always been school projects here and there, but the big school projects were a couple that we did over in Champaign, and those school projects were really a blessing for us through COVID.
Gotcha.
Because the bulk of our work, typically had been in healthcare, and obviously when COVID hit, everybody put the brakes on that. We had some things that we were doing to help with, air exchanges and some of those things with COVID projects, if you will. But the major capital building programs just came to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
In the K through 12, those tax referendums had already been passed. They had to spend the money.
Right.
So that really sustained us, through 2021, 2021 timeframe as well. And then, we've got a reasonable reputation.
Oh, yeah.
That people are still interested in.
Yeah, better than reasonable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any really cool projects going on right now currently?
I think the neatest one is it's in the hopper right now. Well, a couple of them. The District 186 portfolio is.
Yeah. You guys are doing a ton of that work.
I don't know if you've been over to Lanphier.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even recognize it. Yeah,
whole new place.
It's really a super neat investment that the district is making in the school for the community, and then we're working on the Springfield High.
Yeah, when does that start? This summer?
Yeah, it's going to be this summer-ish, sometime in that time frame, and it's going to be a similar scale of renovation and additions to that school as well.
Yeah,
and then we've got Owen Marsh, which is another renovation, and there's a new school that we're going to be doing for 186, and then Southeast has got, I think there's 3 pretty significant projects that are going to happen down at Southeast as well. So, that's an exciting project just for the community in general. Those are tired facilities.
For sure. Yeah. Back in the years when I was a CEO at the chamber, we worked with the district on a kind of a study of the district, really through the eyes of business owners and business leaders. And one of the recommendations was out of that study was to do a facility study. But I love your term, that kind of tired facilities. And because what we continued to hear over and over is the first thing that people look at when they consider the community is they want to drive by the schools.
Right.
They want to see where their kids may go to school. And with those tired facilities, we thought that was probably a good idea, but it's really awesome to see where things are at today
and I think
the investment that's being made.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to where healthcare has been too. If you think about the time period for the investments, they're very similar post-World War II. You've got the Halliburton era, which they talk about, and there's a lot of those hospitals that were built in that time frame in the the 50s, and 60s, and sure they've served their time, but just like healthcare, education has transitioned as well, and expectations are quite a bit different in the way that we educate our young people.
Learning spaces are completely different than they were 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Collaborative environments and places for people to gather. And so, I think those are some really exciting projects that are going to be coming online here. We're going to be working on those over the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And then the Sangamon County Transportation Center is going to be another really cool project that's going to bring together the bus depot and then the high-speed rail component of it as well. And so that's going to be a nice project that they're still working on some funding. We think that that's going to break loose probably in the summer of this year, and it'll finish sometime in 25, hopefully. But I
Yeah.
think with these delays, it might push into early
Push it back a
26
little.
bit.
Yeah.
So one of the things Mike O'Shea said to me about a year ago, he said there's going to be a ton of work coming down the pipeline, 186 and so on and so forth, the things you're already probably working on. And he said that you guys had a real concern about having enough tradesmen or women to handle all this. How's that piece of the business going? I mean, is there enough workers out there to handle the work that you guys are committed to?
Well, it's interesting because we do have some special causes, if you will, that are really tapping into the workforce heavy. If you look at these solar and these wind projects, huge investments, and you get a lot of the the steel workers and electricians. There's a lot of demand, and I'm not sure what other trades are involved in those types of projects, but $500 million solar farm, it's a big draw.
Yeah.
So you've got the capital development board type of projects, and then you've got these other, commercial endeavors that are putting a lot of strain on the workforce.
Gotcha.
I can't remember what the exact figure is, somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion worth of work in Sangamon County.
Yeah.
Which is unprecedented.
Yeah, big number.
And, trying to put a lot of work in place. So our challenge is the lead time to create a journeyman in the trades is 6-7 years.
Wow.
Man.
So if you're like, hey, something's going to happen next year and people want to turn the spigot
the
on,
staging of these things.
you can't respond.
Man.
Wow.
The system, the training and education system for the trades can't respond in that amount of time. So then you got to figure out, okay, how can we be more productive with the resources that we have? How can we all contribute and do this? So we've been working on a lot of those types of initiatives to say, hey, how can we be more effective with the team that we have?
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And aren't you guys involved in a program out at Lanphier High School as well that's kind of in the training process for the trades?
Yeah, we try to give them exposure to the trades.
Okay.
Generally, it's about a 1 semester engagement with them. And what we do is we take them, and I say we, but there's some individuals that are super committed to this.
Yeah.
Tyler's one of them. I know that Zach Hogan's another one, and there's some other people. We take them to experience various trades. So once a week they'll go to, the plumbers union hall.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And they'll try to give them some exposure to say, this is what it's like to be a plumber, and this is, maybe they give them some hands-on experience with here's the tools you use and what the type of work you'd be doing, and take them to the masons and the bricklayers, take them to the electricians, so they start to see what that looks like. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think the first year we had like 8 or 9 individuals that said, I'm all about that. And so they were able to apply and become apprentices in the various unions. And now I know that the participation has ramped up significantly as people saw. They're like, hey, that's a neat experience. And I think they're into the 45 or 50 kids are participating now.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
I say
Yeah.
kids, young adults.
Yeah.
I mean, they're turning this into a career.
Yeah.
Which is exciting, coming right out of high school then.
Sure.
It really is. We had Jennifer Gill on not too long ago, and we were talking about this very topic, that everybody doesn't have to go to a 4-year university, and the kinds of careers that are out there in the trades are significant.
Right.
And I think the community's doing a much better job today than, say, we were doing 10 years ago as a community of providing opportunities for folks to look at that and consider.
And I think in
what
the
they may
past,
do.
we didn't necessarily provide the exposure to
Right.
what are the other options.
Yeah. What else can I do if I don't want to do that?
Everybody always heard about, we got to go to school.
Yes.
We got to go to school. And you're like, well, you're still going to school.
Right.
Yeah.
And like when you're an apprentice,
Yeah.
you're spending
just a
1
different kind of school.
1 to 2 days a week with like some classroom training.
Right.
Right. In addition to your out in the field, like on the job training, as you're learning those components of it too. So there's a lot more technical component to the trades than people necessarily realize.
For sure. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
And you can make a very good living and, respected member of the community as well. So, we're excited.
Absolutely.
People are excited, that people are excited about doing it.
Yeah. Cool. What else you got?
Well, I was just gonna. I was gonna ask him what he likes to do outside of work. Just like like when you're not working, what do you do? What are your hobbies and some of those? You like to travel or?
Yeah, my wife and I, traveling to try to keep up with our 2 sons. That's fun. But we water ski.
Oh, do you?
So that's our kind of our thing. We probably ski least 2 nights a week, maybe 3 nights a week. I like to think I'm a competitive water skier, but I don't. So I ski the slalom course. I've got some friends that we ski that, and so there's a number of folks here in town that do that same thing. So that's fun.
Why am I not surprised? Fighter pilot,
right?
Soccer player for the Naval Academy. All the things he's accomplished. He's a little bit competitive and pushing the edge.
But I love it because it's something physical to do outside. You can do it with your family. And then it's really crazy. Is you hear people? There's the two schools of thought. They're like people that say that BOAT stands for bust out another 1,000. And you're like, and they can be expensive. I get it, but. There's so many lessons that you can learn with your family on a boat if you've never been a part of that, and you're like, okay, you learn how to be a team, and you learn how to contribute, and you learn how to take turns, and you learn how to encourage each other, and it's just
good point.
Yeah, it's just really been fun. And my wife still skis with me, and
that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Exciting, and it's something that we do together. And then we've started to, now that our children have left, right? So you need the spotter in the boat. So I've started to build my water ski network. It's I got the clan around the lake, and it's like got 5 or 6 people on my on my cell phone that I can text. I'm like, hey, you want to ski tomorrow?
Yeah, right. Are you available? That's cool.
So it's good community, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You mentioned earlier the word leadership and what leaders do and so on and so forth. I'm curious if you have any favorite leadership books that you would encourage folks to read who are leaders or aspiring to lead others, at least recently. I know there's a ton of great ones out there.
Right. I'm a big fan of Drucker.
Okay.
And I know he's more of the manager side of things, but I think a lot of those ideas have helped me, and they're pretty pragmatic. His articles are pretty straightforward and pragmatic. Yeah, but I mean, from the leadership perspective, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I have read the recent book I just finished was called Falling Upward. It's by an author, Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R, and he's a Catholic priest, and it's an interesting idea in that he says that there's 2 phases to life. And they're not necessarily set on a time frame. Your first phase of life, you're more concerned about establishing your identity and yourself and your, things that we do in our career. And then the second phase of life, not everybody gets to, because a lot of people stay stuck in that identity piece, the worldly identity. But the second phase of life starts to become more of your role as a mentor, and it's kind of characterized by patience and understanding, which I'm not very good at. So maybe I'm not there yet. But it's a short read. It's a small book, and I found it very insightful. And it was the part that really hit me was he said the first phase of life is characterized by the 10 Commandments.
Sure.
You want rules. Established, black and white. You follow these. The second phase of life, you relate more to the Beatitudes.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't know, it just struck me because it's where you've kind of got this patience and this understanding, and you're you're not judging as much.
Sure.
So.
Interesting. I'll have to pick that up.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a short read. I mean, you'll probably get through it, and you can get through it in a sitting if you wanted to.
Cool.
That's good.
Yeah, we'll have to pick that up. I'm interested.
And then you got to ask the question.
I'm just gonna. Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're. Yeah. I just want to say.
Are you guys setting me up here?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Well, for sure.
I just want to
say, don't want him to miss the question.
It's not that big of a deal, but I just want to say thanks for what you guys do at O'Shea regarding leadership. All the different things that you guys do to bring community folks together. As you well know, Brad and I were in a recent study that you guys held on Wednesday mornings for 6 or 8 weeks, and with probably 30 or 40 other folks. And the contribution, folks know O'Shea because they see your trailers all over town at all these gigantic construction projects. But what a lot of folks don't know is the give back piece of what O'Shea does. And I know you play a significant role in that with Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say, though, Mike's got the vision, and the engagement. And, he firmly believes that the rising tide floats all boats.
Yep.
Yeah. That's evident.
He's right.
That's evident.
Yeah, I mean, how can we all row together and go in the same direction? And we all play a part. All of our businesses play a part.
Right.
And that's, those are the things that it's very interesting when you get some business in the community and they're going to, they've got a different philosophy and they'll bring in an outside contractor because they're a this or they're a that. And you're like, we're here and we're invested in the community. You know what I mean? And, you expect us to use your services and we want to earn your services. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But how do we all work together? And whether that's the leadership component, right? If we build better leaders, we build better organizations, and we can do this all together. And it's not like we've got a lock on the, the system as much as we're like the system is how do we learn from each other?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And bring groups together, whether it's, on the professional side of things. I don't know if you've heard of our Emerging Leaders Program. So there's that professional network and, they focus on, learning from Maxwell's book.
Sure.
I think it's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Or the studies that you're talking about, there's some of the spiritual connection where Mike and Jeff Nelson will lead through some book studies. They're generally spiritually oriented or something, to have those conversations about life.
Right.
And I think a great one, I don't know if you participated in the Every Good Endeavor.
I did not. I did not.
It's a great book. I didn't participate in that one either, but
I would like to if they ever do it again. I would love to.
So, and that's, that intersection of the secular and the spiritual in your lives. And, how a lot of people are like, Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, I work here, and then Sunday I do this. And it's like, no, there's this, this confluence.
This integration here.
This integration of work and life, work and spiritual in your life, and what do you do, right?
Sure.
And it leads to the part of we all contribute.
Yeah.
Regardless of what work you're doing, you're all contributing to the community because. I don't know when the last time you went and got milk from your cow was.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Never. No.
So somebody did that. Right. Somebody delivered it, and somebody stocked the shelves, and so we all have, we all play our part, right? And,
I agree. 100%.
When's the last time I cleaned up after a disaster in my house?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right. We call the experts.
That's right. No,
they come help us out.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, they do a phenomenal job for the community. Every time I participated out there, I've just. I met some great people, like you said. It's bringing the community together.
Yeah. And then we learn from everybody.
Yeah.
We're fortunate that people come and share their expertise with us, and we're like,
all of us.
Wow, you made me a better person.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
So the question.
The question.
The question's not that big of a deal. It might make you think for a minute, but so I like to ask folks, given your life's journey and everything you've done, look, if you could look back at 20, 30 years ago and tell your younger self X, Y, or Z based on your life experience, what might that be?
I would probably say you got to be more patient. And I think one of my biggest challenges, I was always waiting for the next thing. Oh, when I get to there, then I'm going to be whatever, fill in the blank, satisfied, happy, accomplished. And I didn't enjoy the journey as much as I should have. And there were some big moments that I probably missed, because I was looking past them.
Sure.
Instead of living in them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, the patience part of it, I think probably speaks to the book like I was talking about too. And I can see that in my older self, where I was rigid and I was, and I think the military does that to you to some regard. But there's other times where maybe I didn't need to be that. Be so rigid. Mistakes you make. I don't know. There's those short clips you play in your head all the time, right?
Sure.
Like,
I
wish I would have done that differently. And you play that from.
Yeah, we all have a couple of those, don't we?
20 plus years ago, right?
Day.
It's whether it's from your professional life or your personal life, right? With your kids and your wife and your whatever else, and you're like, there's things I wish I would have done differently, but.
Yeah, that's great advice.
It is.
Enjoy the journey.
The book is interesting. The book that I was just talking about, part of the idea of falling upward is like, hey, we all fall.
Right.
Yeah.
We all stumble and make mistakes.
Absolutely.
How do you take that and then learn from it and move upward?
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting, relationship back to the book.
Interesting.
It's kind of the same idea. It's like, hey, don't beat yourself up for what you could have done differently.
Sure.
Give yourself some grace.
I like that.
And learn from it. Try not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's oftentimes easier to give grace to others than ourselves, isn't it?
Right.
Well, that's what I learned from that forgiving class.
Yeah.
It is. Absolutely.
For sure.
So,
well, hey, Harry, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. It's
been a lot of fun.
It's been fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
it's been
you.
awesome. Yeah.
Appreciate you guys inviting me over here, and I've enjoyed watching the other podcasts and learning from the other people that you've talked to too. The history of Springfield, and like you mentioned, the story behind the story has been really fun and exciting. And thanks for letting me join.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a bunch of folks who enjoy yours.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yep.